It was the cold that woke me, the kind that slides under your skin before your mind has time to name it. One second I was dreaming something about a lake, her laughing somewhere just out of sight, and the next, my hand reached across the nylon floor of the tent and touched nothing but empty sleeping bag. Her warmth was gone. For a moment, I stayed still, listening. The wind whispered against the canvas, carrying the sharp scent of pine and the dying embers of the fire we'd built hours earlier. The trip was supposed to be a reset, a way to stitch the seams back together after months of quiet, bleeding rifts. 3 days in the mountains, away from cell towers, from obligations, from the unspoken things piling up between us. 3 days. Just us. And Adam. I told myself not to panic. She probably just needed air. Maybe a bathroom break. Maybe she'd stepped out to watch the stars, the way she used to back when things were still easy between us. Still, something in me tugged. A memory rising unwanted, her laugh too sharp at dinner, the way she leaned away when I touched her hand earlier, the flicker of something dark crossing Adam's face when he thought I wasn't looking. I unzipped the tent slowly, the sound tearing open the stillness, and stepped into the night. The fire had burned low, just a skeleton of red coals, but the smoke still curled upward in lazy ribbons. And there they were, sitting side by side, their backs to me. Close. Too close. Her knee brushed his every time she shifted. His shoulder tilted toward her, as if pulled by some gravity he couldn't fight. Her hand moved to tuck her hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she only had when she was trying to seem casual, unbothered. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did, and simply didn't care. I stood there a long moment, long enough to map the scene in permanent detail. Her hoodie pulled tight around her frame. His hand, resting just a little too casually on the log between them. The way the fire painted them in the same soft gold. I thought about saying something, a sharp word to cut through the illusion. A question she wouldn't be able to answer. Instead, I turned around and walked back to the tent. When she slipped back in an hour later, her hands were cold, her movements too careful. She smelled of smoke and something else I couldn't name. She didn't say a word, just crawled into her sleeping bag with a sigh that was too loud in the quiet. I kept my eyes closed, breathing steady, pretending to dream of a world where I didn't know better. In the morning, everything was different. She smiled like nothing had happened, handing me a cup of coffee that tasted like ashes. Adam joked about needing a new pair of hiking boots, laughing too hard at his own story. I nodded along, played the part, the silent witness to a crime they both pretended hadn't been committed. But it was there, in the flicker of her gaze when our eyes met, in the brittle edge to her laughter, in the way she avoided sitting too close, now that the darkness couldn't hide them. Guilt without remorse. A sickness without a cure. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't demand explanations that would only insult us both. I simply stopped speaking. At first, she tried to cover the silence with small talk, half-hearted jokes, questions she already knew the answers to. But when I offered nothing in return, not anger, not forgiveness, not even acknowledgement, she began to unravel faster than I expected. She needed a villain to push against, a mistake to apologize for, or deny, or weaponize. But I gave her nothing. And in that void, the truth grew heavier, more real. Some betrayals don't shatter you all at once. Some rot you slowly, from the inside out. And that was just the first night. The hike that morning was brutal. The trail cut a sharp ascent through the trees, each step grinding against the cold silence between us. Her boots scuffed the loose stones. Adam whistled tunelessly ahead, the sound jagged in the thin mountain air. Neither of them mentioned the night before. Neither of them had to. She kept looking back at me, as if expecting me to say something, to reset the balance, to crack a joke about how out of shape I was, like I usually did, or complain about the incline, or anything that would give her a foothold back into the story we'd been telling ourselves for years. But I stayed silent, and the mountain kept climbing. Halfway up, We stopped by a narrow ledge overlooking a valley dusted with mist. I watched her stand too close to him again, shoulder to shoulder, pretending it was about the view, pretending it was about the cold wind slicing down from the peaks. Adam pointed at something in the distance. She leaned in to see. His hand brushed her lower back. Casual, unthinking, natural. I turned away before she could catch me watching. The day blurred after that. Hours of trudging through switchbacks and rocky slopes. She kept trying to engage me, comments about the weather, about the ridiculousness of hauling so much gear up such a steep incline. But my answers, when they came at all, were clipped, dry, almost mechanical. At some point, Adam dropped back to walk beside me. "Hey man," he said, tossing me a lopsided grin. "You good?" His voice was too light, too easy. I nodded once, staring straight ahead. He kept pace with me for a while, talking about nothing, the best kind of freeze-dried meals, the stupid bears in a documentary he'd watched, how next time we should bring more bourbon. Like nothing had shifted. Like we weren't walking through the wreckage of something none of us wanted to name. Eventually, he drifted ahead again, whistling that same empty tune. I watched the back of his neck, the way it flushed pink from the cold, and thought, absurdly, about how many times I'd trusted him. Trusted them both. Late nights after work, beers at my place, double dates and inside jokes. Years folding neatly into years. How many moments had I missed? How many times had I laughed a little too hard at a joke I didn't fully understand? How many glances had passed between them when I wasn't looking? The ground under my boots felt less stable the more I thought about it. That night, we made camp by a frozen creek, the water moving slow and thick under a crust of ice. The tent was a small dome, meant for two, but we squeezed 3 sleeping bags inside like always. Adam stretched out first, yawning theatrically. She curled up next to me, her back to his, a careful distance between us all. The fire outside burned low again. I watched the shadows flicker on the walls of the tent, a distorted dance I couldn't look away from. She rolled over after a while, her breath warm against my collarbone. "Hey," she whispered, like a secret. I said nothing. Her fingers traced the edge of my sleeping bag. A hesitant touch. "Testing. I'm glad we came," she said, her voice too bright, too soft, as if maybe if she said it enough, it would become true. I stared at the ceiling of the tent, watching the nylon ripple with the wind. In the dark, every small sound became amplified. The rustle of her jacket. The distant crack of ice splitting somewhere downstream. The steady, even breathing from Adam, too steady, too practiced. I turned my face toward the cold wall of the tent and closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come. Only memories. The way she'd slipped her hand into mine on the drive up, but pulled away too fast when Adam asked about the playlist. The way she laughed at his jokes now, laughter that used to be mine. How she packed her clothes alongside his in the same duffel bag, saying it was more efficient because they were just sharing a few things. I had noticed. Of course I had. But some betrayals aren't seen all at once. They bleed in. Slow. Insidious. Inevitable. The next morning, when I woke, she was already outside. I sat up slowly, muscles stiff from the cold, and watched through the tent's open flap. She stood by the creek, arms wrapped tight around herself, staring into the mist like she was waiting for something. Or someone. Adam came up behind her a minute later, 2 mugs of coffee steaming in his hands. He handed one to her without a word. She took it, their fingers brushing too long, too familiar. I pulled the sleeping bag tighter around me, feeling the smallness of the tent, the way it trapped the last warmth I had left. They thought they were being subtle. Maybe they believed the mountains would forgive them. Maybe they believed I would. When she came back into the tent, cheeks red from the cold and hair tangled by the wind, she gave me a careful smile. "We should pack up soon," she said. "Long hike today." I nodded. Said nothing. She hesitated, just a breath, then knelt by her sleeping bag and began rolling it tight with mechanical efficiency. Adam whistled from outside, calling something about breakfast. She smiled at me again, weaker this time, like a page tearing along a fold. I watched her hands work, quick and precise. The way she tugged the straps too tight, the way her knuckles went white around the buckles. Not guilt, not sorrow, just urgency, as if moving faster could outrun the thing growing between us. But it was too late for that. Some things, once seen, can never be unseen. Some nights, once broken, split open a life forever. And somewhere deep inside, colder than the wind whipping down the mountainside, I already knew. This wouldn't end in silence. Not forever. Something was coming, and neither of them was ready for it. We broke camp before sunrise. The trail wound higher into the mountains, thinner now, the trees falling away into scrub and rock. The air smelled sharper here, like crushed stone and bitter roots. She hiked ahead of me. Adam stayed behind, claiming to adjust the straps on his pack. But really, I knew, to avoid walking side by side. 3 bodies strung out along a narrow, invisible thread, held together by habit and a story none of us could tell anymore. She didn't look back at me once. Mid-morning, we stopped by a ridge to catch our breath. The mist had burned off by then, leaving the world raw and too bright. She sat on a flat rock, sipping from her water bottle, staring off into the distance like she could will herself somewhere else. Adam hovered nearby, pretending to check the map, but his eyes flicked toward her every few seconds. I knelt by my pack, pretending to tighten a strap, and caught something tucked just inside the side pocket of hers. Something that shouldn't have been there. A phone. Not mine. Not hers. A second phone. Cheap burner plastic. Half hidden under a jacket she'd claimed she didn't pack. I looked up slowly. She was laughing at something Adam said, her face turned away from me, her shoulders tight like they knew I was watching. I didn't move. Didn't touch it. Just memorized it. Later, when we made camp again, this time in a barren clearing where the ground was too hard to stake the tent properly, I waited until they went down to the stream to fill the water filter. I unzipped her pack. Quick, practice fingers. No sound. The phone was off. No passcode. Dead battery. But even just holding it felt like betrayal, humming low and electric in my palms. Why would she need a second phone? Out here, where we promised no distractions. No secrets. Unless the secrets were the point. I tucked it back exactly where I found it. No trace. No mistake. When they returned, their voices too loud, too casual, I was already back by the fire, feeding twigs into the embers. She set the filtered water down near the tent and crouched by the fire pit, too busy arranging rocks to notice the way I watched her. Adam flopped down heavily beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, the contact too familiar, too assuming. "You think it'll rain tonight?" he asked. I shook my head once. A silence stretched out between us, heavy and uneven. He cleared his throat. "You've been quiet," he said, half a joke, half a challenge. I shrugged. Sometimes there's more power in not answering. More accusation in silence than words could ever carry. He shifted uncomfortably, picking at a frayed edge on his jacket sleeve. She glanced up then, something sharp flashing across her face before she smoothed it away. Adam tried again. "You know, man, if you want to talk about anything, it's cool." The offer hung there, dangling between us like bait. I let it rot in the air. He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering distraction, hoping I'd confess to some imagined slight, hoping I'd name something smaller than the truth clawing inside my chest. I stood and walked away, down to the edge of the trees where the shadows pooled thick and black between the pines. Let them wonder what I knew. Let them squirm. That night, the cold came in harder, slicing through the tent like knives. The thin sleeping bags were no match for it. She huddled closer in her sleep, her body curving instinctively toward mine. I didn't move. Adam shifted behind us, muttering in his sleep. His foot kicked the tent wall. His breathing hitched into restless gasps. Guilt has a shape in the dark. It smells like sweat and broken promises. I stared at the nylon ceiling, counting the seconds between his sighs. When I finally drifted into a shallow, broken sleep, I dreamed of fire, of her hand slipping out of mine, of laughter just beyond the trees where I couldn't reach, of waking alone, again and again. The next morning, the storm broke, not in words, in gestures, in tiny fractures. When we packed up camp, she dropped her thermos and cursed under her breath, a word she never used around me. Adam snapped at her for rushing. She flinched, her smile brittle, the mask slipping for half a heartbeat. We hiked without speaking. The trail narrowed to a ledge barely wide enough for one. I let Adam go ahead. Let him have the risk. The steep fall. The loose stones. When he stumbled once, just a small slip, nothing serious, he caught himself too quickly, glanced back at me too sharply. Like he thought, for 1 second, I might not catch him if he fell. He was right. By midday, we reached the lake, the destination she'd picked months ago, back when this trip was just a dream on a calendar. A small, frozen mirror tucked between sheer cliffs. The wind skated across its surface, leaving the ice dusted with fine powder. We pitched camp again, out of habit more than anything. The fire struggled against the wind, stubborn and thin. She sat by it, arms wrapped around her knees, face buried in the collar of her jacket. Adam hovered nearby, pretending to be absorbed in setting up the tent. I watched them. The distance between them was wrong now. Too careful. Too measured. Too late. Whatever had been hidden was rotting in plain sight. And still, they clung to the story they thought they could salvage. The fire snapped and popped. Sparks leapt into the twilight. She caught my eye across the flames, her expression hollowed out by the cold and something deeper. Guilt, but not regret. Never regret. The tent rustled in the growing dark. Adam's silhouette hunched small against the nylon walls. She opened her mouth, as if to speak. I looked away. The fire crackled, and the silence grew teeth. That night, I waited until they slept. The fire outside had long gone out. The tent was a dome of breath and quiet fidgeting. Her back faced me again, always facing away now. Adam's breathing came slower than usual, less steady, shallow. I knew he wasn't asleep. Not really. Neither was I. I shifted slightly in my bag, just enough to reach for her pack. Her breathing didn't change. No response. Either she didn't notice or she was pretending not to. I slid the burner phone from the side pocket. Dead battery or not, I wanted proof it was real. Something outside my head. I flicked my headlamp on low, covered the beam with my hand, and pried off the back of the phone. The battery slid free, light as nothing. And behind it, taped with a single strip of medical adhesive, was a folded piece of paper. I knew before I opened it. I knew. I opened it anyway. It was a receipt. A simple, meaningless gas station receipt. $7.23. Gas, gum, and a bottle of water. Purchased 2 days before our trip began. But scribbled on the back, in her handwriting, the handwriting I'd watched scrawl grocery lists and anniversary notes and names for children we never had, was a message. Just 2 lines. You can say no. I'll still leave with you. He won't suspect anything. He never does. I sat there, the paper trembling between my fingers, the cold pressing in from every side. 7 words. That was all it took to end everything. I could still hear her voice in my head. The soft, hopeful cadence she used when she was lying. The one she used when she said things like, "This trip will be good for us," or, "I'm just tired lately." 7 words. And yet, I folded the paper, slid it back behind the battery, and returned the phone to her pack. Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wanted her to have time to choose. Not between us. Between honesty and cowardice. In the morning, she woke before either of us. I heard the zipper open, the rush of wind, the crunch of her boots against the frost. Adam stirred beside me. Stiff. Uncomfortable. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. When I stepped out of the tent, she was standing by the lake, watching the sunrise bleed across the ice. A brush of gold, thin as breath. She didn't turn when I approached. "You ever think about how thin it is?" she said quietly. I didn't answer. She nodded at the lake. "The ice. It looks solid, but it's not. Not really. One wrong step." Still, I said nothing. She turned then, finally. Her eyes were red. Tired. Or something else. I watched her face like a stranger would. Like I'd never known her favorite breakfast or the way she used to hum under her breath while folding laundry. She took a breath, as if preparing to speak, but whatever she was about to say collapsed in her throat. Instead, she just said, "Coffee?" I nodded once. Later that day, we took a shortcut Adam swore was marked on the map, though neither of us could find it. It led us through a narrow pass, barely wide enough for two people. The wind howled between the rocks. The snow underfoot had melted and refrozen, slick as glass. At one point, she slipped. Just a small thing. Her foot slid. She yelped, her hand grabbing instinctively for the closest shoulder. Mine. I caught her out of reflex. For a brief moment, her hand clutched my jacket, her face inches from mine, her breath ragged. "Thanks," she muttered, eyes wide. I let go. Her hand lingered. I didn't look at her as I kept walking. That night, we reached the final camp. The last stop before the trail would circle back toward the parking lot, the cars, the world. She and Adam sat across from each other at the fire, their movements careful, like they were each waiting for the other to crack first. She barely touched her food. He kept glancing at her when he thought I wasn't watching. At one point, she stood to refill her bottle from the stream, and Adam followed a beat too late. They thought I didn't notice. I did. When they returned, she sat farther from him than before. Guilt changes shape when no one speaks it aloud. It turns into paranoia, into tension that feels like thunder before the lightning. Adam cleared his throat once, twice. "Hey," he said finally, his voice low and uncertain. You think we're good?" He didn't look at me. I didn't answer. Because the thing about questions like that, rhetorical, desperate, defensive, is they're never really about what they're asking. They're a confession in disguise. That night, I waited for them to fall asleep again. She drifted off fast, exhaustion dragging her under. Adam stayed awake longer. At one point, he shifted, rolled onto his back, and whispered into the dark. I didn't mean for it to happen. I stared at the ceiling of the tent, my fists clenched inside my sleeping bag. He didn't say anything else. Just that. And then he fell asleep. Or pretended to. I lay there for hours, watching the flicker of the dying fire seep through the nylon like blood through gauze. There it was. The final crack. He thought that was enough. That a whispered regret, spoken in the dark, could erase everything. But some things, once said, cannot be unsaid. And some things, some betrayals, deserve no answer. Only consequence. We started the hike down in silence. No one said it, but we all felt it, that this was the end of something. Not just the trip, or the trail, but whatever had existed between us. Whatever illusion we'd been clinging to in the thin mountain air. She walked ahead of us. Adam behind. I stayed in the middle, exactly where they couldn't reach me. The path down was steeper than I remembered. My knees ached from the descent. My pack felt heavier than when we'd started, like the weight of everything unsaid had settled into the seams of the gear. At one point, she stumbled, just slightly, and caught herself without help. Adam asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. Around noon, we stopped for lunch. A half-hearted affair. Energy bars, a few sips of lukewarm water. We sat on a flat outcrop overlooking the forest below, the trees rolling away into green oblivion. She sat across from me, her legs crossed tightly, fingers worrying a piece of fabric from her jacket hem. She looked like she hadn't slept, like the weight of keeping it together had finally started to buckle her spine. Adam stood a few feet away, pretending to be interested in the view, but I could feel his nerves bleeding into the air between us. His shoulders were too stiff. His hands kept fidgeting with his water bottle. She cleared her throat once. Then again. As she started, then stopped. My eyes met hers, and something in her cracked. I didn't plan it, she said finally, her voice low, as if saying it any louder would summon something worse. I kept chewing, slow and deliberate. She watched me, waiting, hoping, maybe, for some release, some explosion. Anything but this unbearable stillness. I didn't plan it, she repeated. We weren't. It didn't mean anything. I swallowed the last bite of my protein bar and brushed the crumbs off my fingers. You were supposed to be asleep, she said, quieter now. That night by the fire. Adam turned away from the ledge, staring at her, then me, then down at his feet. She kept going. I just needed to talk. Things between us have been hard. You know that. I just needed to feel something normal again. My silence wrapped around her like a noose. I never wanted to hurt you, she said. I let that one sit for a moment. Let it breathe. Then I finally spoke. Just one word. When? She blinked, startled. What? When did it start? Her mouth opened, closed. A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, a few months ago. Adam sat down heavily, like the word itself had knocked the air from his lungs. She looked at him, then quickly looked away. A few months, I repeated, nodding, not angry, just nodding. That weekend in Denver, I said. She flinched. Your conference ran long. You stayed an extra night. No one spoke. I saw the hotel receipt, I added. Different room than yours. 2 breakfasts. Adam buried his face in his hands. She stared at the dirt between her boots. I stood up then, brushing the dust off my pants. I know about the phone, I said. Her head snapped up. The burner, I clarified. The note. Behind the battery. Her breath hitched. Her hand moved instinctively toward her pack, like she needed to confirm it was still there. It was never about not knowing, I said. It was about seeing how far you'd go without telling the truth. Adam looked at me then, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like he couldn't decide if I was about to hit him or just walk away. I did neither. I picked up my pack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked. The rest of the hike passed in fractured silence. She didn't try to speak again. Adam kept his distance. I led. I didn't know if they followed out of habit or fear or just inertia, but they followed. And when we reached the parking lot, 3 cars sat quietly beneath the pines, dusted with pollen and thyme. I unlocked mine. They stood there awkwardly, unsure of what to do, whether to speak, whether they were dismissed. She stepped forward, slow. I opened the car door. Wait, she said. Can we? I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were glassy, raw. Not from crying, she hadn't cried, but from the quiet unraveling that happens when someone finally loses control of the story they were trying to sell. No, I said. Just that. Then I got in, closed the door, turned the key. I pulled away without looking in the mirror. That night, back home, I left everything in the car. The pack, the gear, the dirt-caked boots. I showered with the lights off, the hot water scalding my skin, trying to scrub off the scent of wood smoke and guilt that wasn't mine. The house was too quiet. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom we used to share, staring at the half-made bed, the dent in the pillow she used to sleep on. Then I turned off the light and went asleep on the couch. The next morning, I blocked her number and his, but not before I sent them both the same message. No greeting, no goodbye, just this. I saw everything. I heard more, but what I'll remember is the silence after. I deleted their replies unread. Then I turned my phone off and went for a walk, because there are things worse than betrayal. There is trust and the slow death of it. There is what comes after, when the fire has burned down and the night is cold and you realize. They never thought you'd see. They never thought you'd leave. I didn't speak to anyone for the first few days after I got back. No texts, no calls, no explanations. I didn't go back to work. I didn't answer emails. I just existed. The silence that had started in that tent had followed me home. But here, it was different. Not suffocating. Not heavy with expectation. It was clean, cold, honest. There was a peace in that. I made coffee every morning and drank it black, standing by the window, watching the street outside. She didn't come by. Neither did Adam. I think they both knew better. On the fourth day, I went back to the storage closet in the hallway and pulled out the shoebox. Notebooks, old cards, faded pictures of us at campsites and barbecues and other borrowed lives. A photo from 3 years ago, her smiling with wind-tangled hair, sunglasses perched on her forehead, me with my arm around her, sunburned and content. I looked at it a long time, not for the memory, for the lie I hadn't seen yet, the way she was already leaning slightly away. I didn't rip it up. I didn't burn the box. I just closed the lid and slid it to the back again. Some truths don't need altars. They just need distance. Later that week, I went for a hike. Alone. Not to the same mountains. Not even close. Just a nearby trail with low trees and a ridge where the sun caught the rocks in a way that reminded me of something older than pain. I brought nothing but a water bottle and a jacket. Halfway up the path, I passed a couple walking hand in hand, laughing at something I didn't hear. They nodded at me. I nodded back. I didn't feel jealous or angry. I felt nothing. Just an echo. That used to be me. Not anymore. She emailed once. A week after I got back. The subject line was blank. The message was short. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I should. But I still love you. I hope you believe that. I didn't respond. Because it didn't matter. Love, in the end, is a story people tell themselves to feel clean about what they took. What she meant was, I miss who I was when I was with you. What she meant was, I want forgiveness, not because I deserve it, but because the guilt is heavy. And I wasn't going to carry that for her. Not anymore. A few months passed. The house was quieter, emptier. I moved out of the bedroom. I donated her coats. Left her books in a box on the porch. They were gone the next day. Friends texted. Asked what happened. I gave them nothing. Because the version they believe wasn't the one I lived. People like her don't wear betrayal on the outside. They smile. They're charming. They say all the right things and let other people connect the dots, wrongly, while they keep their hands clean. I didn't need to correct the record. The truth didn't need a defense. It had already happened. One night, I found the burner phone again. Still dead. Still blank. I almost threw it out. But then I opened the back one more time. The receipt was still there. The note. You can say no. I'll still leave with you. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I folded it up again. Taped it shut. And this time, I walked it out to the fire pit in the backyard. I lit it. Watched the flame catch slowly, then all at once. The plastic hissed and curled. The paper blackened and folded in on itself. No drama. No applause. Just silence. Real, final silence. Sometimes people ask why I don't date anymore. I smile. Shrug. Say something vague. They think I'm still healing. They don't know I already did. That what came after wasn't heartbreak. It was the moment I stopped trying to rewrite the past into something less humiliating. I saw what I saw, and I stayed silent. That was my punishment. That was my power. And I carry it with me quietly, like a scar on skin no one sees. I still hike, alone, still drink coffee by the window, still sleep with one eye open, sometimes waiting for a sound that never comes. But I don't wait for her anymore. Or for closure, or for some last-minute truth to tie it all up neatly. Because the truth already came. It came in firelight. In the distance between two people who should have been strangers. In the guilt she couldn't hide. In the way I stopped speaking and she couldn't stand it. I don't need an apology. I don't need revenge. I just needed the silence. And now, I have it. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next confession. Until next time, take care and watch who you trust.